Alrighty, I think I'm on. So let's see what else. As I mentioned, we have been in this series about finding hope in the dark times. And so we've been at it for quite a while, and the whole challenge for us is thinking about being light in the darkness. So for our guests, and for some that aren't internet connected and aren't able to see it, I want to give you a quick review on what happened last week. We've been taking a look at how to find things and hope in the darkness. And so we got to Joseph. And so last week, I called it the Pits of Despair, somewhat after the movie Princess Bride. So Joseph, we realized, was covered in 37 to 50, chapters 37 to 50 in the book of Genesis, which is a huge chunk of that book. There's only 50 chapters. Well over a third, almost a half, is committed to Joseph and Jacob and that family line and the story of how they wind up in Egypt. And so, just by way of quick summary, a lot of you know the story. Joseph's been out with his fancy coat, hooked up with the brothers. They put him in the pit. And then they decide to sell him. And by that time, the Midianite traders were passing by. His brothers pulled Joseph out of the cistern, sold him for 20 pieces of silver, less than the going price of a slave, to the Ishmaelites, who took Joseph with them down to Egypt. And so the first pit that we talked about in this sort of the pits of despair, this is my favorite scene, that guy, he's Psycho Man in The Princess Bride, and that's for all those that know the movie. It was like it's 20 plus years old, 25 years old, so most of you should have seen it. So anyway, that's the man in charge of the pit of despair. And Joseph, my suggestion was that he found himself in the pit of abandonment. And you can go online and watch the whole message, and so I won't go into all the details about how that happens and how that happens in our lives, but many of us have had that sense of being abandoned. But he is sold into slavery, and he goes down into Egypt. He's bought by Potiphar, and then we have these great words. From that moment on, God blessed the home of the Egyptian, all because of Joseph. The blessing of God spread over everything he owned at home and in the fields, and all Potiphar had to concern himself was eating 3 meals a day. Didn't have to worry about healthcare, didn't have to worry about the price of gas, and Jesse, that was great about worry, right? So Potiphar, at least, is worry-free. And so then I had this question. Could it be that your dark place is God's opportunity to bless others through you? Sometimes we don't think about our hard places as having a God intention, but Joseph's life teaches us that. But the problem with Joseph was he was really handsome. Joseph was a strikingly handsome man, it says in Genesis 39. As time went on, his master's wife became infatuated with Joseph. Sleep with me. But he wouldn't do it. How could I violate his trust, his master's trust, and sin against God? She pestered him day after day after day, but he stood his ground. Joseph's master sort of gets the news because she contrives the storyline that he had tried to violate her forcefully. And so the master, Joseph's master, took him and threw him into the jail where the king's prisoners were locked up. And so we often live in the world of false accusations. Somebody will say something about us, and then we wind up in another pit. And I call that the pit of shame and disgrace. And these are very difficult days, and some of our families now are having to deal with the shame, the pit of shame and disgrace. And then I love this verse, but there in jail, God was still with Joseph. Sometimes in our dark days we forget, and that's why this passage, even as Jesse had shared with us, that from Joshua, he'll be with us. He will always be with us. And the head jailer gave Joseph free rein, and God was with him. Whatever he did, God made sure it worked out for the best. And so then there's the dreamers as well as Joseph, the cupbearer and the baker. One's got good news, the other one's got tragic news, and the cupbearer is reinstated back into Pharaoh's home. And then this tragic verse, but the head cupbearer never gave Joseph another thought. He forgot all about him. Some of us know what that's like. I call it the pit of being forgotten. Family don't call, friends don't call, past employees don't call, people that you thought were close to you, and you deal with the sense of being forgotten. And that's a very, very difficult place. And the question was, how long would you wait for God to bring your dark days to an end? So these 3 simple pits. the pit of abandonment, shame, and disgrace, and the pit of being forgotten. So that's where we were in Joseph's life. And so we followed that along to that point. But now we pick it up. So we're going to pick it up in Genesis 45 to 50, and we're going to cover all the chapters because we're going to be done with Joseph by the time we're done today. But we're not going to read them all. That might take a couple of minutes. So here's what happens. Joseph is now in second place only to Pharaoh. He's had Pharaoh's dreams interpreted, and now he's at a place where they've had the plenty, and now they're in the land of famine, in the desert place and in the bountiful place. And now they're in the desert place. And as that unfolds, there's some critical things that are starting to happen with the family. So the family decides that they need to go down and find food, and somebody went, yo, there's food down in Egypt. And so they don't care how it got there. They just know that they can save themselves by chasing down this food. And so Joseph's brothers are sent by their father Jacob to go down and buy some food. He loads them up with lots of stuff. They take it down to Egypt because they don't know how long it's going to last, but they're going to bring that stuff back and keep alive, basically. So we know the picture, right? So Joseph is there. He's second in command. People are coming in to buy goods from Egypt, and they show up in front of their brother. When Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them. But he disguised himself to them and spoke to them harshly. So remember, this is like maybe a decade or more, maybe almost 2 decades that Joseph has been off the scene, and the brothers think he's not there. And so he spoke to them harshly. I got wondering, what's with that? His brothers just showed up. How amazing would that be after all those years that his brothers show up? And what kind of treatment does he give them? Treats them harshly. So we'll figure out why in just a minute. And he said to them, where have you come from? And they said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. I think it was this question that he has in his mind. Can I trust these boys? Can I trust them? What's gone on in their lives? Can I trust you? And so he has this conversation with them that's wrapped around trying to see if they've become any better. But Joseph had recognized his brothers, although they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams which he had about them. And he said to them, you are spies. You have come to look at the undefended parts of our land. So here's the first thing. This pit is not abandonment, it's not shame and disgrace, it's not being forgotten, it's the pit of bitterness. And that's what we're going to talk about today. The pit of bitterness. So the first thing that I think starts to happen is we start remembering the past. And we bring up things from our past. And so here are the brothers. Joseph recognizes them, but they don't recognize him. Because he doesn't look like that sniveling 17-year-old they threw in the pit. He's now dressed to the max as the second only to Pharaoh. He's now a suntans, bronzed god kind of guy, still looking really good. Remember, he's handsome. And so there he is. But he has this bitterness moment where he starts to remember his past. And sometimes we forget about things, and we've covered them, we've buried them or whatever, and something triggers us, like they show up. And all of those feelings and all that emotion sort of surface, and bitterness starts to show itself. So he accuses them of being spies. And they said to him, no, my lord, but your servants have come to buy food. That's why they're here. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. I can just hear Joseph going, yeah, I bet. Right? It's like, I know what you boys are like. I know what you do. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies. Yet he said to them, no, you have come to look at the undefended parts of the land. But they said, your servants are 12 brothers. Now they're giving some of the history, right? In all, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan, and behold, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no longer alive. Right? Are they honest men? That's an interesting question, right? Now, they think that he could be dead because the last they saw him was decades ago. And so they're going, yeah, we sold him into slavery. What usually happens to most slaves? Short life expectancy, right? So he's no longer alive. Joseph said to them, "It is as I said to you, you are spies. By this you will be tested. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here." Here's the deal. You are going to be in trouble. You'll never get a chance to have any help unless you get your kid brother here. Send one of you that he may get your brother while you remain confined, that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you. You know, one of the things about confronting somebody who's hurt you and you hold, as it were, bitterness or the potential for it, is you question everything about them. So, here's what happens. "But if not, by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies." So he put them all together in prison for 4 days. Isn't that an interesting thought? So, he put them in prison. It's like, he put his brothers in prison, for goodness sakes. Like, what's with that? They're his brothers. Where's the forgiveness? Where's the non-bitterness or the unbitterness? I don't know what the word is. It's not there. Yeah, like, where's the brotherly love showing up? Thanks, Susan. So I put him in jail for 3 days. Here's the thing. Bitterness always will try to seek revenge. And at this point, I don't know that Joseph has really processed everything yet. But he throws those boys in jail. 3 days, and I think he was in jail for about 3 years. He sends them to the same place, basically. Here, have a taste of what it was like to be abandoned, to be cast into a pit. Some interesting things that are going on there. So in contrast, like, where's the love for the brothers? The Apostle Paul, because bitterness is a standard emotion, he says this: "Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, to avenge I will repay, says the Lord." Another one is, it is written, "Do not take your own revenge, but leave room for the wrath of God." It shows up in here. This is a filling out of that passage. Never pay back evil for evil to those whom you like, to those who agree with you. No, it says, never pay back evil for evil to anyone. Respect what is right in the sight of all men. If possible, as far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men, as far as it's possible. Never take your own revenge, beloved, but leave room for the wrath of God. For it is written, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord." In Hebrews 10, "For we know him who said, 'Vengeance is mine, I will repay,' says the Lord. And again, the Lord will judge his people." Our problem is we want him to act way faster. Like, it's like something happens, it's like, okay, I'm ready right now. Like, this week would be good. And then that week goes, okay, what happened? Like, why didn't you do something? And so it goes a long, long time. Vengeance and bitterness can destroy us, and it can go a long, long time. So then here's what happens. Now Joseph said to them on the 3rd day, he brings them back out of the pit, "Do this and live, for I fear God." It's a first statement about his spiritual place. I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be confined in your prison. But as for the rest of you, go, carry grain for the famine of your households, and bring your youngest brother to me, so the words may be verified. He's still putting out a challenge. Yep, one can stay, the rest of you can go. And it's sort of like, I'm keeping that boy to make sure you get back. And it's like, I'm going to see if you're actually honest and whether you'll actually care about your brother. And so they did so. He just doesn't trust them yet. And really, they haven't given him any occasion to trust. And that's the thing about bitterness. It breaks the trust that we have for people. So then they said to one another, have a little conversation. Whoa. Truly, We are guilty concerning our brother. So remember, like we're talking a long time back, and remorse shows up, and we are guilty concerning our brother because we saw the distress of his soul when he pleaded with us. Here's the 17-year-old kid in the pit, and I'm going, he's yelling all the time. Get me out of here, get me out of here. Why have you done this to me? Pleading with them. And we mentioned last week in the message that they sat down for supper. It's like, we're just not going to care. We're not going to listen. Yet, we would not listen. Therefore, this distress has come upon us. And they look back at their behavior and they carry it forward and they go, the things that are happening now are because of something we did 20 years ago. And Reuben answered them saying, didn't I tell you, do not sin against the boy? And you would not listen. Now comes the reckoning for his blood. What they did not know, however, was that Joseph understood every word they were saying. So he hears them with this sense of, we're guilty. This judgment is on us because of what we did. A sense of remorse starts to surface. There was an interpreter, that's why the boys thought that he didn't understand what was going on. And this fabulous verse, he turned away from them and wept. It's such a moving passage in all the other things that have gone on. Because I think he's weeping because all of these negative things that had filled his heart when he saw his brothers, he's in this emotional turmoil. When you see somebody that's offended you or you remember something like that, we spiral into this emotional turmoil. And Joseph was there. You see, emotional turmoil can be a powerful catalyst to reconnect us with our divine nature. Though that sort of turmoil sort of should be prompting us to think about eternal things. It propels us into a journey of self-discovery and urges us to learn how to love and accept our inner being. We have to come to terms with that bitterness. We've got to call it by its name and realize what it is. So he weeps for them, comes back and returns to them and spoke to them, and he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. They'd just been out in jail for 3 days. Stinky, smelly, come back up. You guys get to leave. I'm taking Simeon. And he binds them and puts them back in jail. Here's something else about bitterness. Remembering the past, seeking revenge, and then often taking action to somehow personally punish the betrayer. We just try to get even. And so in some ways, he's reminding the brothers, you better do right, because this is just a sampling of what might happen. So here's what happens. They go home. There's a whole lot of stuff you can read about it. The famine gets worse. They get short on food because it's a 7-year famine. And so Jacob says to them, you need to go back. And they're going, yeah, we can't go back without Benjamin. And so they have this conversation. No, you can't send him because it's going to take my heart. And I've lost one son and now I'm going to lose my other. And so they finally will convince him. So when they get to Egypt, they're greeted. He makes arrangements for them to come for dinner. Lunchtime, actually. So they prepared the present for Joseph coming at noon. So they had a gift because they got home and there was silver in their sacks. And so they needed to bring all that back and more as a gift to try and protect themselves and to protect their brother. So at noon, for they had heard that they were to eat a meal there. When Joseph came home, he was working that morning, they brought into the house to him the present which was in their hand and bowed to the ground before him. Remember the dream? Then he asked them about their welfare. How's it going? And he said, is your old father well, of whom you spoke? Is he still alive? And they said, your servant, our father, is well. He is still alive. And they bowed down in homage. It's mentioned again a second time. Because in Joseph's dream, you'll remember, they were going to bow down before him. And as he lifted his eyes, he saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son. And he said, is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me? Because he hasn't seen that boy. He was born after. And he said, "May God be gracious to you, my son." It's an interesting statement. Joseph hurried out, for he was deeply stirred over his brothers, and he sought a place to weep. You know, bitterness and remorse and regret and all those things evoke such intense emotions. And this is the second time where he's just spilled over and starts to weep. And he entered his chamber and wept there. Then he washed his face, came out, and he controlled himself, collected himself. Hey, I'm second to Pharaoh. I got to be right. And he said, "Serve the meal. Let's have something to eat." Bitterness, remembering the past, seeking revenge, trying to punish the betrayer, and then the sense of personal remorse or regret. Because we become introspective, and you're going, "I can't believe I reacted this way. This isn't me. This isn't who I want to be." And so there's this sense of personal remorse, and Joseph goes off and thinks, how could I put my brothers in jail? Who knows what he thought? I can't put words into his mind, but for whatever reason, he comes back, and remorse is part of that experience. So they served him by himself and them by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat bread with the Hebrews, for that is loathsome to the Egyptians. Racial discrimination 101. We would never eat with those people. Those people. So then we know the story. Joseph will make himself known to his brothers. But here's the thing. It's about broken trust. And how do you survive betrayal and start to trust again? And that's where Joseph now finds himself. Can I get beyond the betrayal and start to trust him? Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him and cried, "Everyone get out of here. Everyone go out from me." So there was no man with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. This was a private family matter. Let me encourage you, with bitterness issues, don't post it on Facebook. Don't tell your neighbors. It's family business. And all too often, we're looking for somebody we can spew over on instead of taking care of the family business. We've got this lovely medieval painting of Joseph revealing himself to his brothers. So he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard of it. He's still weeping. Everybody leaves, and he breaks into tears again. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" You see that tender question about the father and the son? The one who gave him the coat, the one who loved on him the way that he had. Brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. You know the adage, fight or flight, right? There are two others that are included in that. One of them is freeze, and the other is faint. So when we're encountering traumatic moments, we do know those first two, but like the brothers, they froze. It's like they didn't have an answer. They had nothing to say. It's like when you come home and tell your parents that you drove the car into the ditch, right? And they just pause and they just freeze. And depending upon their containment skill set, you will hear from them, but you might not hear right away. And they were dismayed at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Please come closer to me." And they came closer, and he said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt." Now, I've wrestled with whether I wanted to use this as an explanation, but a buddy of mine in Athletes in Action years ago posed this question: why did the brothers need to come close? So that they could look into his eyes closer, maybe see his cheekbones. He is handsome after all, right? What was there about coming close for this Hebrew and the other Hebrews in that room? Only them in that room. So my buddy DJ, he goes, here's what I think happened. He reveals himself because The only boys in that room were circumcised. Weird, I know, right? But how are you going to prove that it's exactly? Some of you will catch into that. It's like, that's a very strange image you just put in my mind, Harold, right? But he brings them close because they still won't believe it. And there's only one way for sure, right? And so he reveals himself to the brothers. And then the passage continues. Do not be grieved or angry with yourselves. This is a compassionate, tender, don't beat yourself up over this. Because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. You sold me, God sent me. What a tremendous place to be at the end of bitterness. That whatever those things were, God had a plan and a purpose in it. And so it's this, remembering the past, seeking revenge, trying to punish the betrayer, coming to a place of personal remorse or regret, and then forgiveness and restoration. It's a beautiful, beautiful story about how God blesses us. In God's hands, intended evil becomes eventual good. That's a fantastic quote from Max Lucado. Our problem is it can often take a lifetime to get there. And Joseph continues, God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth. Why am I here? It's to make sure you have a legacy. It's to make sure our Father has a legacy and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh and Lord over all his house and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. It was not you who sent me here, but God. I want to challenge us to think hard about the things in our past and sort of wonder and see, can I find or look for some even small indicator of what God was doing in shaping me for this moment? We do know that trust takes years to build, right? Years to build, but seconds to break and forever to repair. It can seem like that because it's hard. In Genesis 50, verse 20, as it gets to the end of Joseph's life, he says, as a reminder, as for you, you meant it for evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. Every test in our life makes us bitter or better. Every problem comes to break us or to make us. The choice is ours whether we become victim or victor. Hebrews picks it up again. See to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God. That no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble, and by it many become defiled. Proverbs 20:22. Do not say, I'll pay you back for the wrong. Wait for the Lord, and he will avenge you. The verse in Psalm 37. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. We've got family and friends that are in physical circumstance because somebody did something to them. And trying to come to terms with being still and waiting patiently for the Lord. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not yourselves over the one who prospers in his way, or over the man who carries out evil devices. Refrain from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not yourself. Don't worry. It tends only to evil. For the evildoers shall be cut off, but those who wait for the Lord shall inherit the land. Paul writes to the church in Ephesus, let all bitterness and wrath and clamor and anger and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. Count it all joy, James writes, and my brothers, when you meet various kinds of trials, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness, or perseverance is another translation, have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. And Paul from Romans 8, we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who are called according to his purpose. All of us have a past. Some of us have had to figure out what to do about the revenge that I feel to family, employer, friend. You just want to punish them somehow. And what we find is that isn't productive for me, and it definitely isn't going to be productive for them. And so we come to a place of personal remorse and then forgiveness. I want to encourage us to be the light in someone's bitterness. I want us to figure out what it's like to cast all of our anxieties on him, because he cares for us. Like the phrase, "It is well with my soul." We're going to sing this song as a concluding song. Let's stand, and then we're going to close in prayer. I need thee every hour.
I need thee every hour, most gracious Lord. No tender voice like thine can peace afford. I need thee, oh, I need thee, every hour I need thee. Oh, bless me now, my Savior, I come to